We're continuing the performance review series focusing on the Buffalo Bills cornerbacks today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Happy Tuesday to you, and thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day. And as a reminder to you, we are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Well, folks, we've got a big conversation to have today about the Buffalo Bills cornerbacks. A lot of very meaningful players on the roster are in this position group, whether it's some established vets that are on big contracts and even several young players on rookie deals that I can't wait to get into with you today. Tomorrow we'll get to safeties, and we will be able to tie a ribbon on this entire performance review conversation and really then shift our attention to where the Bills can get better from within, and then ultimately where I know everyone wants to get in is the players from outside the organization, whether it's free agency or the draft that can elevate the roster. So we're going to look at all of that, but got to finish up with the self-scouting part of the offseason conversation first. So let's do it. Let's get going here today. Talking about Tre'Davious White first, a 2017 first-round pick, number 27 overall. Trey White is 28 years old. He turns 29 in January, so he just turned 28. As far as his contract, he's entering year 2 of his 4-year, $69 million contract extension. And the Bills have some flexibility here. They can do a base restructure to his deal for a savings of $5 million in cap space this year, which I think is something that Brandon Beane will need to entertain given the dynamics of the Bills cap situation. In 2022, Trey White played in 6 games with 6 starts, was on the field during 79% of the defensive snaps during those 6 games, collected 6 pass breakups, 1 interception, a passer rating against his coverage of 70.7, which is very good, and a missed tackle rate of 9.1%. And I would say all of those numbers are actually pretty good. That missed tackle rate is an area that I can live with from Trey White. The passer rating against of 70.7 is outstanding. As far as his review goes, well, it took him a while to get back, right? I remember originally speculating that he would return after the bye in the Green Bay game. And people thought I was crazy for saying that. Turns out I was too aggressive. His return came week 12, Thanksgiving against the Lions. And that was a long process for him to get back, right at about a year. You know, you talk about that ACL recovery timetable. It's 9 to 12 months. Well, for Trey White, it's 12 months. And it's different for every player, and especially for a guy like Trey White, where I know a lot of the talking point with Trey White and coming back from the ACL was this is really his first ever big injury that he had to work back from. So not only does he have to heal, he has to get strong, but he has to be able to have confidence in his ability to go out and perform and trust that the surgically repaired knee would hold up. And that took him for some time, obviously. I think he found his form, though, as the season moved along. I'm not sure he was ever fully back, right? The Trey White that we remember for all the years as a number 1 corner for the Bills. But I think there were flashes of that that I really enjoyed down the stretch. And I thought he became more consistent as the season elongated. So obviously there's a big need for him to be all the way back next year, right? And so when I think about his 2023 outlook, I mean, that's it. He's a big ticket player that needs to be all the way back for this football team. You know, I think my biggest concerns always with Tre'Davious White have been tackling consistency and run support. And so I'd love to see better contributions there. But the biggest thing for Trey White to provide this defense with next year is that true number 1 corner that takes away the football, right? That ability that Trey White has to take away the football, to invade the catch point, to get turnovers, whether it's forcing a fumble, recovering a fumble, intercepting a pass. You know, that's what's always been a separator for me when it comes to Trey White and other top corners. It's not just the coverage ability, but it's how he can impact football games by taking away the football in clutch situations. And so all of that being back on the table for Trey White next year would be a big, big deal for this football team. And when I think about players who can make a greater impact in 2023 than they did in 2022, and it really moved the needle for the team, Trey White is high on that list. And I like that, right? Because I feel like it's obtainable. We're not counting on him to get better or be a different player. We're counting on him to just kind of keep finding his form. And I think there's a pathway that makes sense for him to get there. So I'm excited for Trey White in 2023. Let's move on to Kaiir Elam, a 2022 first-round pick, number 23 overall. Kaiir Elam is 21 years old. He turns 22 in May. He's entering year 2 of his 4-year, $13.7 million rookie deal. His 2022 stats, and I want to include the playoffs here because I don't think we're talking enough about Kaiir Elam and him being a very strong performer in both playoff games against the Dolphins and the Bengals. I know that the Dolphins game speaks for itself. I mean, as big of an impact as anybody in that game, but he was good against the Bengals too. And I know that we haven't looked back at that game and had much positive to say, but Kaiir Elam was a really strong contributor in that football game. So his 2022 stats, including playoffs, 15 games, 7 starts on the field for 57% of the defensive snaps, had 4 pass breakups, 3 interceptions, passer rating against his coverage of 83.7, a missed tackle rate of 11.5. And I would say that the passer rating it's a number you can live with. The missed tackle rate is about what I expected for Kaiir Elam. Never watched him at Florida and thought he was a very consistent tackler. So I'm hoping for more growth there. I thought his tackling down the stretch got a lot better, but I think those are all numbers that you can live with. I do want to point out the 2 playoff games because in those games combined, he was on the field for 56 coverage snaps. And on those snaps, he gave up 2 catches on 5 targets for 8 yards and collected an interception that was a game-changing play against Miami. And then he also had 2 run stuffs. And so I thought Kaiir played really good football in the playoffs. And that's really encouraging. When you think about the trajectory of rookies throughout their rookie season, you want to see growth. And we saw that from James Cook. We saw that from Kaiir Elam. We didn't see that from Terrell Bernard, right? We talked about this yesterday where, Terrell Bernard went from a 4-phase special teamer to, we're not going to dress you in the playoffs, right? So that rookie season year trajectory tells you a lot. And I'm really pleased with where it's at for James Cook and Kaiir Elam, the Bills' first 2 picks. So as for my 2022 review with Kaiir Elam, I was really satisfied with him when he was on the field, right? When he was on the field, still had to kind of rotate in and out with Christian Benford early on, and then rotating in and out with Dane Jackson later on in the season. Missed a couple of games with an ankle injury. So when he was on the field, I thought he played well. I mean, for a rookie corner, I never felt like he was picked on outside of course, the Pittsburgh game. And I think that was a game plan specific thing from Pittsburgh's perspective to take their rookie quarterback in Kenny Pickett, tough environment, on the road in Buffalo, your first ever career NFL start against a good Bills defense. And they wanted to move the launch point and isolate George Pickens and, down the field and throw him the football. And he had 10 catches. Kaiir Elam gave up 10 catches in that game. We only gave up 33 all year, including those 10. He didn't give up more than 3 catches in any other game all season long. So he gives up 10 against Pittsburgh and 23 in the other 14 games he played in. And look, I mean, I wanted Kaiir Elam on the field more, but clearly the coaching staff wanted to try some different combinations at cornerback. It felt like they were pretty reluctant to not have one of Dane Jackson or even Xavier Rhodes or Trey White on the field, right? They wanted to have the veteran to go with the young player at corner. And that took away from some playing time with Kaiir Elam. As far as his 2023 outlook, the outside corners for the Buffalo Bills next year have to be Trey White and Kaiir Elam. You have 2 first-round picks invested here. You have an established player in Trey White, a high upside player in Kaiir Elam. Let them play. And I always go back. When I think about Kaiir Elam, I think a lot about my time at Bills camp. I was there for like the last week. And being around the team and observing Kaiir Elam being every day the first guy on the field doing individual work. being super focused during practice, and then being the last guy off the field every single day. This guy was really dialed in. I mean, he wanted coaching. He wanted to perfect every detail. And that's just who he is. I talked with somebody actually when I was at the Senior Bowl a couple of weeks ago that was part of the Florida staff when Kaiir Elam was there. And he said, that's who he is, man. That's not fake. Him wanting the playbook to get on the plane before he came to Buffalo, that's just who he is, man. Raved about his habits. And so I'm looking for Kaiir Elam to establish himself as a long-term pillar and building block for the defense next year, and building upon some really, really strong flashes that we saw during his rookie season. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. When you're at your best, you can do great things, but sometimes life gets you bogged down and you may feel overwhelmed or like you're not showing up in the way that you want to. Working with a therapist can help you get closer to the best version of you, because when you feel empowered, you're more prepared to take on everything life throws at you. If you're thinking about giving therapy a try, BetterHelp is a great option. It's convenient, flexible, affordable, and entirely online. All you do is fill out a brief questionnaire. You get matched with a licensed therapist, and then you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. If you want to live a more empowered life, therapy can help get you there. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month over at BetterHelp. All right, let's talk about Dane Jackson, a 2020 7th-round pick, number 239 overall. He's 26 years old. He turns 27 in November. As far as his contract, he is a restricted free agent. So his contract is expired, but he's not an unrestricted free agent. He's a restricted free agent, much like the Ryan Bates situation last year. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about the contract, but I think about Dane Jackson as a guy that the team values. Whether you like him or not, I think Frazier and McDermott love him, and they speak very highly of him and have at every opportunity over the last 3 years. Now, if they do a restricted free agent tender for Dane Jackson, it's going to be right at $2.63 million. And that's a hard number, right? So if you tender him, you bring him back for 1 year, $2.63 million, that gives you no flexibility. Now, your other alternative there is you can let him walk. You don't have to tender him. You can let him become a free agent. An unrestricted free agent, but also you can try to work out a multi-year deal with a low year one price tag. And I don't know if that's something Dane Jackson would be interested in. I don't know if that's something the team would be interested in, but as I think of creative ways to get him back on the roster, if you want him back as depth, that's what you're probably going to have to do. I don't know if you want to do a clean 2.63 hard number against the cap this coming year for a guy that's going to be a reserve corner and special teamer. But that's what's on the table for Brandon Beane to consider this offseason. As far as his 2022 statistical production, 17 games, 15 starts, was on the field for 82% of the snaps on defense, collected 2 interceptions, 11 pass breakups, passer rating of 81.9 against his coverage, and a missed tackle rate of 15.5%. Numbers you can live with outside of the missed tackle rate. That's way too high. And we'll talk about that here in a moment. But as we get to the 2022 review, Dane Jackson had a decent start to the finish. I think he had he had a decent start to the season, an okay finish to the season, but really in the middle of the season struggled. You go from that stretch of the Vikings, Browns, Lions, Patriots, Jets games, that 5-game kind of middle of the season, week 10 through 14. That was a struggle for Dane Jackson, but I thought he was fairly sound otherwise. Missed tackles really stand out. I know that he got exposed a few times in terms of not being able to make a play on the ball at the catch point. But I thought the missed tackles were as big of a black eye for him on this season as anything. And really a lot of run defense blunders. That kind of caught me off guard because those in his first 2 seasons were 2 areas that I thought were strong suits for him. And he regressed significantly as a tackler and as a run support corner this past year. I think he's a good depth player. And if you forecast him like that as a depth player, spot starter, I think you can appreciate who he is, a guy that gives you value on special teams. But because he was an important part of the defense with Trey White working back and sprinkling him in with the other rookies, or not, well, the rookies, he's not a rookie, but the young players, he only played 7 snaps of special teams this past year. And so I think if he's back, then special teams needs to be a bigger part of his role as a reserve next season. I think in 2022, he played 7 snaps last year. Last year before that, it was 120 snaps of special teams. So that'll need to be back on his plate. So as far as my outlook, if he's back, he's got to provide depth in special teams. I don't want to live in a world where he's platooning with Kaiir Elam. I think when you drafted Kaiir Elam, you made a choice. You said that this is going to be our future at corner. And I'd like to see the Bills lean into that heavily all the way next season. I want to talk about Christian Benford as well here before we get to the slot corner. So next segment, we'll get to Taron Johnson and Siran Neal. But Christian Benford's a really interesting piece for this entire secondary. And I think he's an appropriate player to talk about after Dane Jackson, because I think what they do with Christian Benford can dictate a little bit of what I think will happen with Dane Jackson. So let's get into it. Christian Benford, 2022 6th round draft pick, number 185 overall. 22 years old. He turns 23 in September. He's entering year 2 of his 4-year, $3.8 million rookie contract. In 2022, he played in 9 games, 5 starts, on the field for 62% of the defensive snaps in those 9 games, played 49% of the special team snaps, collected 1 interception, 5 pass breakups, passer rating of 89.1 against his coverage, and a missed tackle rate of 20.7, which is way too high. So for my review for Christian Benford as a rookie, I think you have to be impressed. I mean, a 6th-round pick comes in and starts the first 3 games of the season over your first-round pick, Kaiir Elam, before Benford gets injured and is kept out of the lineup for 2 weeks. And then, of course, he got injured again later in the season. That really kind of put him on the shelf for the year. But I thought we saw some really good flashes on the field for him. We saw a smart player in coverage with good spacing. He quickly gained the trust of the coaching staff, right? I know that they say all this type of stuff about how, well, it doesn't matter if you're a 1st-round pick, a 3rd-round pick, or an undrafted free agent, the best players are going to play. Well, that's true, but it's often not reality. And for him to eat into Kaiir Elam's playing time as a 1st-round pick that the Bills traded up to get, and Christian Benford coming in as a 6th-round pick and getting playing time over him, that says a lot about how quickly he gained the trust of the coaching staff, and there was a belief in him that he can help this football team. Now, missed tackles were a concern, but I think if you go back to him at Villanova, that wasn't much of an issue. He was a good tackler, and we saw with the Bills as a rookie, a guy that's willing to be physical. And so I'm optimistic that can get better, because we can't live in a world where he's got a 21% missed tackle rate. That's not acceptable. But you can cut that in half pretty easily. And then I always go back to his time at Villanova, and I'm mindful of the ball production that he had. I mean, 7 interceptions, like a ton of pass breakups. 7 interceptions his last year. He had 9 for his career, and I think near 50 pass breakups. And at Villanova, I mean, he's a smart player that's around the football, that's physical, that can take it away, and he can tackle. I mean, there's a lot to be intrigued about when it comes to Christian Benford. And so as for his 2023 outlook, this is where it gets interesting, because I've said this before, even when the Bills drafted him, in something that Coach McDermott hinted at already this offseason, is that there's a chance that this guy moves to safety. And I'm not ruling out him being the starting safety opposite of Micah Hyde next season. I think there's good complementary skill sets in terms of physicality to pair with Micah Hyde. And I think it's a clear way for the Bills to get starter contributions on the cheap, which they're going to need to. Now, I don't think you could put all your eggs into the basket of Christian Benford being a solid starter opposite of Micah Hyde, but I think it's fair to hope it happens. I think this is the type of hit the Bills need with a draft pick, and I think there's a path for it turning out to be one. Now, obviously, there's some unknowns, and there needs to be competition, but I would definitely try it out. I thought he gained really important experience this year at corner, which I think if he does move to safety will only help him. And that's something that, the Bills with their safeties, whether it is Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer as converted corners, Cam Lewis, who they took from corner and moved to safety this past year, they like that corner background in their safeties. And I think Christian Benford, with 1 year of time gaining that corner experience, is a guy that quickly gained the trust of the coaching staff, that started over your 1st-round pick at the same position when he's a 6th-round pick. I think they want to have a role for this guy. And the clearest path for Christian Benford is at safety. And maybe that's also where he'll play his best football, given his skill set with the ball skills and the football intelligence and the physicality. And so I'm here for it. I want to see this happen. Again, I don't think you go into the year saying this is our starter opposite of Micah Hyde. You want to have some contingencies in place, but I certainly hope it happens. Because, I mean, I know we all want Jordan Poyer to be back. I just don't think that's reality. And so as you think about the path forward, Christian Benford looks very attractive to me with, some good depth behind him in case it doesn't come to fruition. But I think there's a reasonable chance that it does. Are you looking for a delicious treat, but you don't want all the fat and calories? Well, then you got to try a Built Bar. We just got through the holidays. I know everyone wants to eat a little healthier this year. Well, if you're looking for a healthy snack, you got to try Built Bars. These things are delicious and they're healthy for you. First of all, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. They come in great flavors and they're healthy. 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 17 grams of protein. These macros are off the charts. And look, for years I've been telling you, go to Built.com and you can order them, and you still can. But also, they're available at Walmart and Sam's Club. So check them out over there. Get yourself some Built Bars. You'll thank me later because these are the best tasting protein bars on the planet. All right, we've got some more corners to get to. I want to get to the slot corners here, Taron Johnson and Siran Neal, and then we'll just kind of tie a ribbon on the cornerback discussion. So Taron Johnson, a 2018 fourth-round pick, number 121 overall, 26 years old. He turns 27 in July, entering year 2 of his 3-year, $24 million deal. The Bills can restructure that, do a base restructure, and they can free up $2.2 million in cap space. They probably need to do it. So I think all the restructures that are possible to put the Bills in a position to have some flexibility will happen. And Taron Johnson, with 2 years left on his deal, knowing that he's going to be your featured slot player for those 2 seasons, he's a good candidate for a restructure. In 2022, Taron Johnson played in 16 games with 15 starts, on the field for 92% of the defensive snaps, had an interception, 9 pass breakups, passer rating of 107.9 against his coverage, and a missed tackle rate of 11.8%. I know that passer rating feels a little high, and it is, but I think it's also just a product of the role that he's asked to play on this defense. Playing in the slot, the Bills space the field in such a way that funnels some throws to him. So there's some completions that happen, but he's a very meaningful part of this defense. And so as I get to his 2022 review, I mean, Taron Johnson's an absolute stud of a slot player. He's a cornerback for the Bills, a slot corner, but he's also a linebacker. I have so much respect for his game, the role that he's asked to fill. He's become a tough and dependable player. I know early on in his career we were concerned about the injuries and the durability. Well, over the last 3 years, he's missed 1 game. 1. He's a critical piece of the defense. I know that some people hear base nickel and that rubs people the wrong way, but that's the NFL. The 75-80% of the time teams are in nickel. And I know the Bills are an even higher percentage, but this is how the game's played. And when you have a guy that you trust to fit the run, that you trust to cover, it's a big deal for you to be able to play defense the way that you want to play it. And what he has to do in terms of fitting the run is pretty doggone tough, and he does a great job. He does a really good job. So as for my 2023 outlook with Taron Johnson, this one's easy. I mean, more of the same. He's in that bucket of guys that you know exactly who they are, you know exactly what you're getting, and you're completely happy with it. I mentioned this bucket of Matt Milano and Deion Dawkins and Mitch Morse and Josh Allen and Steph Diggs. Well, dump Taron Johnson right into it. He's a rock-solid player that's dependable, and you know what you're getting, and he fills a very important role for this defense. Let's get to Siran Neal, a 2018 fifth-round pick. He's 28 years old. He turns 29 in August. He's entering year 2 of his 3-year, $9 million contract extension, and the Bills have some flexibility here. They can release him after June 1st and create $2.78 million in cap space. They can't really restructure him. It's not set up in a way that makes that a favorable option, but they can cut him and free up some space if they want to. And that's a tough choice because we know that he's an awesome special teams player, but he really doesn't help you on defense. So let's get into that. In 2022, he played 63 defensive snaps, which were the lowest of his career since his rookie season. He's been over 150, I'm pretty sure, the last 3 years. And just 63 defensive snaps this year. Was on the field for 77% of the special team snaps, is a four-phase special teamer. He led the team in special teams tackles, but he doesn't really help on defense. And so that's the book on Siran Neal. Impact special teamer that doesn't provide value on defense. And so, like I mentioned, the fewest defensive snaps since his rookie season by a lot. So when I think about him for 2023, I mean, the contract is one to look at. Can you get him back on a lesser deal? I mean, these are the questions you have to ask yourselves. I know that we all enjoy special teams contributions from Siran Neal and how he covers kicks and punts, and I think all that's valuable. You know that I do. But as this team has to find ways to get, clear cap space and put it all together and go compete, these are the things you have to be thinking about. And so if he's back, you know what you're getting. But do you want to sign up for that, or do you want the $2.78 million in cap space? So it's questions that leads the questions, right? Okay, you want to move on? Who's your gunner? Who's your jammer? Who's your best kickoff coverage guy? It's tough to figure out. The Bills are facing a challenging offseason. As I get deeper and deeper into this, it's going to be tough on Brandon Beane. It's going to be real tough because he's going to have to find ways to improve by potentially having to get rid of meaningful players and not a whole lot of opportunity to bring in outside players. So we'll find out, man. He's got a lot of work ahead of him. But as we tie a ribbon on the conversation regarding cornerbacks, I think the biggest thing to sort out is what you want to do with Dane Jackson. Because if you let Dane Jackson go, then you might want to keep Christian Benford as a depth player at corner, right? You're not going to – who's your depth at outside corner if you don't have Dane Jackson back? Well, that player's not on the roster. And so bringing back Dane Jackson facilitates, to me, the opportunity for Christian Benford to go to safety. So I like that trajectory. I like bringing back Dane Jackson as depth at corner, and I like that it enables that move for Christian Benford to get to safety. And then the same thing with Siran Neal, where do you want to keep him? Well, no. Okay, well, who's your backup to Taron Johnson, right? And I don't think that's not a spot that the Bills can take lightly on the roster. We know that Siran Neal is the first man off the bench, or was last year, in the slot. We learned that against Cincinnati, in the DeMar Hamlin game. Taron goes down, and they brought in Siran Neal to play slot. So while he doesn't play a lot on defense, he's the primary backup to Taron Johnson, who's a critical piece of your defense. Oh, by the way, he's a top-tier special teamer. And so I'm inclined to bring him, to just keep him, because you need the depth at slot and you need the special teams. But it's something that Brandon Beane's going to have to sort out. So obviously you got some stuff to figure out there with Jackson, Neal, and Benford. But then on top of that, it's all about Trey White returning to form, and it's all about Kaiir Elam's development. I mean, this is a position group where the cast of characters right now, you could just bring them all back and get some bodies for camp, and you feel like you're good to go. Even if Christian Benford moves to safety, because you do have Dane Jackson back. And of course, you'll find somebody along the way, whether it's a draft pick to add to the mix, or UDFA, or low-cost vet, right? That'll all happen. So it's a position group that feels good, but like them all, there's some dynamics here that can shift it very quickly. And so we'll see what the Buffalo Bills do here. All right, folks, that's it for today on the podcast. Tomorrow, we will get to the safeties and be done with the performance review series before we get into herd mentality later in the week on Thursday. So don't miss anything. Make sure that you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow.